All right, welcome to another episode of Off-Season Grades. And today I've got none other than Matt McCall with me. So who else would we be discussing? The Florida Gators and Todd Golden. He goes into his third year. Last year, got to the NCAA tournament, which was huge for him in his second season in Gainesville. And he's revamped it a little bit. Brought in some key transfer that I know both you and I like coming from FAU, and Elijah Martin brings back Walter Clayton. They've got a good team back. I'm not sure it's overpowering, but a lot of people have them in the preseason top 25, Matt. Let's first talk about what Golden has done so far in his tenure in Gainesville and kind of how it equates to what you thought it would be. Realistic expectations after Mike White left and Golden comes in. Has he met those?
Yeah, I think he's met them. Obviously, the expectation and the standard that Billy Donovan created at Florida is unfair, to be honest. I mean, let's just call it like it is, Jeff. What he was able to do there for 19 seasons, it's like you're chasing a little bit of a ghost. And I dealt with it personally at UMass with Calipari. So, we got to set that aside. But for Todd Golden in year two to show progress and get to the NCAA tournament was huge. Now it's, can you take the next step? Can you really be in the fight for an SEC regular season championship? Can you make a run in the SEC tournament? Can you get to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament? That's the standard. Say what you want, Mike White and Gator fans were happy, unhappy with whatever. He got to an Elite Eight. Now, he never won an SEC title, but he got to an Elite Eight. He was one game away against South Carolina of going to a Final Four. So I think for the Gators to get to the second weekend, to just be in the hunt, to be in the fight. I'm not saying they got to win it, but to be in the hunt and the fight for an SEC title, I think would be huge, which is not going to be easy, because you got new teams coming in, there's more teams, and you got some similar faces in different spots. So it's going to be tough. And then you got some familiar faces in Bruce Pearl and Rick Barnes that are still coaching in their spots. So, but I think Todd Golden has done a phenomenal job. When you watch him on the sidelines, he does have this confidence about himself. He does. I mean, he really believes, and that's not a knock on him. I think he has to have that to compete with the Sharks that are in the SEC. The biggest key is, and I think they addressed some of this in the transfer portal, as good as they've been on the offensive end of the floor, they got to take a step on the other end of the floor, right? Like, you could score 100, but you can't give up 98, right? You still win the game, but that's going to come back to bite you, especially when you get to an NCAA tournament. So 12th nationally in offensive efficiency, but 94th in defense. They got to make some strides on that end, in my opinion.
Well, and again, what did they do to really shore that up? I mean, they're big, obviously. Micah Hanlogan is out for the year after that brutal injury at the end of SEC tournament where he broke his leg. So now, you're talking about having a guy that was experienced in that program with a year under his belt coming over from Marshall. Now you kind of throw in a new guy, right? Like Ruben Chinyelu from Washington State, who really didn't do a whole lot last year out there in the Pac-12, right? He played about 12 minutes a game, put up modest numbers, and now he's going to have some pressure on him to start at that 5. And really, like you said, he doesn't need to give you a ton offensively. All he's got to do is be kind of a rim runner, lob threat, right? He's got to protect the rim. He's got to stay out of foul trouble. He's got to rebound. He's got to run the court and finish. But is he, we're going to talk a lot about Elijah Martin, right, as the key addition. But is this kid almost more important? Because if they can't stop anybody around the basket, like you said, you're going to win some games with your offense, but you're not going anywhere deep in the NCAA tournament.
Well, if it's Chinyelu or if it's Alex Condon, who's coming back, who led the team in blocks last year, he also made 11 threes. Chris Harry wrote an article recently, and for those that don't know, Chris Harry we call him Gator Zone Chris. He does all the stories on Gator Zone. for the University of Florida. And we as coaches, we don't tend to overreact in the summer, but we as media people sometimes do. And Chris Harry wrote an article like, this guy is going to be phenomenal, and he looks great in summer workouts. Got to take it with a grain of salt because it's in the summertime.
But we
don't
saw
overreact, but it's huge.
We saw this with Condon last year in limited time. Like, you could see the upside of this kid from Australia, like super talented, skilled, like you said, can block shots, like just a versatile big.
Yeah. Well, I think too, the staff, based on the comments that were in this article, are really, really high on Chinyelu. I mean, they're high on him. They feel like he can make some moves down there in the post. But to your point, Jeff, can he guard pick and rolls, and can he affect shots at the rim and rebound? That's what they need him to do. They have the firepower in the backcourt. The backcourt's fine. Yeah. Can these guys affect the game on the defensive end of the floor at the 5 spot? And then I think Sam Alexis from Chattanooga, he's going to be able to come in and gives them a little bit of a different presence. Averaged 11 and 9 in the Southern Conference, which is a great league. But more of an athlete, runner, jumper, probably can play some 4, play some 5 if they need him to play there, if Condon or Chinyelu's in foul trouble. But make no mistake about it. And I think Florida did a good job in the portal. I think their staff did a great job. But Chinyelu and Sam Alexis, they got to get production out of those guys. Like they need really, really positive production for them to be in the fight for an SEC title.
And Condon's probably got to be an all-league type player. I mean, he really does need to make that jump, and they're going to need somebody in the front court to emerge because, like you said, listen, how many backcourts do you feel better about in the SEC than the trio, right, of Walter Clayton, who's now he's gonna have a lot more on his plate, running the team. Like, he's gonna be the de facto point guard now. Elijah Martin, who I really want to get into here in a second, and Will Richard, who comes back. So, like, those 3, I mean, you got to feel great about because they've played a lot of basketball, and Clayton's got a year under his belt in Gainesville, but his role will be different. But all right, let's talk about the other newcomer, which is Elijah Martin, and he did not have a great year last year at FAU. We expected him to be right there with Nelly Davis, and I just felt like the chemistry was never there last year. I don't know if it's because of all the expectations in the preseason. I don't know if it's because Nelly Davis kind of did this after the Arizona game in December, and Elijah never kind of knew how to play, maybe, I don't know. But Elijah Martin didn't look like the Elijah Martin I thought he was going to be a year ago. What is Florida getting, number one, with Elijah Martin, and what do they need from him?
Well, Jeff, there's a lot to unpack here. And I want to go back to last year because Dusty May is a good friend of mine. You know that. And I was down there a bunch. And in September and October, he was not in workouts. He was dealing with a foot injury. So he missed all that time. So let's start there. It was amazing to me being at practice when practice would end and the doors would open. The amount of people that would come in and are tugging at these guys for commercials and deals. And this is FAU. Right. And I love FAU. I worked there for 3 years under Mike Jarvis. I've got great respect for Dusty May and the job he did. But it's
nobody
never
came in. When you were there, nobody walked in that building.
Nobody was in there. Nobody. And for them to get to where they did and return, I think the expectations played a huge part on him. Yeah. Huge. I think the injury played a huge part on him. So he's entering this season extremely healthy. Was there a disconnect from those guys? I think at times probably because, when you're coming off a year like they had and then you're returning, the thought of player of the year, draft pick, like those thoughts are there. Like they are there. And I think he's getting a fresh start. But the biggest key to me, and we talked about the front court, is can those 3 guards coexist? They got to be on the same page. Yeah. They have to be on the same page. Now, what are they getting with Elijah Martin? have a good friend, Justin Duffy, who's become friends with them, and you know, we were talking the other day. He went back and watched some Elijah Martin film from 2 years ago. Any Gator fan, go back and watch the NCAA tournament from 2 years ago and watch Elijah Martin. The explosiveness, the athleticism, the ability to finish in and around the basket, and also knock down threes from the perimeter. They played him at that kind of 3-4 hybrid spot. Like, I want Gator fans to think of a better shooting version of Casey Prather on that 2014 Final Four team. That kind of athlete, not probably as long as Casey was, but can use him in so many different ways. But the key to the Gators is, can those guys coexist? Because if you look at Nelly Davis, Nick Boyd, and how those three in that NCAA tournament from 2 years ago were clicking, that's what Florida needs. They need these three guards to completely be on the same page. It can't be Walter Clayton trying to get to the NBA. Like, Walter Clayton may not need to average 18 points per game this year. He may need to, if he's getting all this attention, can he develop his overall game? I mean, 100 more shot attempts than the next guy on the Florida Gators from last year. Like, there's some firepower there. Like, use it. Like, move the ball. Don't let it stick. So I just think, look, as much as they need production out of that front court, can those three guys get on the same page? They got to be on the same page for Florida to reach its ceiling.
I think that Clayton has the ability to be a lead guard. I really do. I know Pullum was the guy who had the ball in his hands, probably, distributing the most last year. He's gone. They don't have like a true point guard, but I just remember seeing Clayton at Iona a couple of years ago and thinking, like, this dude can play with the ball in his hands and make people better, and score. And like you said, if he can average, instead of 17 or 18, can he average 15 and 6 and make sure everybody else is happy? That's the key to me. But, Elijah Martin's got to get back to what he was with a clear mind. Like, get healthy. Obviously, that's key. But like a clear mind, he just didn't look right mentally. He didn't know when to go and when not to, and where his spots were and where his shots were coming from. Like, he just looked, he looked like a freshman out there last year, the way he was playing, to be honest, mentally.
Well, Jeff, too, like, that's my point. That previous year, there was no overthinking.
Right.
And
there's no pressure.
For Elijah,
and there was no pressure.
And I think for him, you just said it. He was overthinking everything. And when you have people and just thoughts in your head of what's next, NBA, I was on draft boards last year, I got to have a good year this year. That's why I had so much respect for Nelly Davis, too. It was like, he didn't have that mentality at Alma. He went after it, much like he did the year before. And I just felt like it almost seemed like Elijah was stuck in quicksand at times. And fresh start, new coach, new team. This is going to be good for him. He's got, veteran Torian Green on that staff, who, obviously is arguably the greatest point guard based on winning that's ever played at the University of Florida, who I know has worked hand in hand with him all summer. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see what he can do, because I think you can attest to this, spending some time being around those guys. He's a high character guy. He's a team first, like, you never saw him, even when he wasn't playing well,
Didn't
droop his shoulders, drop his head, not cheer for his teammates, not be there when they were winning and high-fiving guys, even if he didn't play well. Like, at the Field of 68 Classic, I think he had like 2 field goals one game, and he was still cheering louder than anybody else. I mean, so forget the talent piece, the character piece. You want to see him finish his career off the right way at the University of Florida, because he is a really, really good person.
Will Richard, obviously he started his career at Belmont, came over to Florida, had a good year last year. Good shooter, good third option on the perimeter. I mean, that's the beautiful thing. If you're Todd Golden, now you got 3 guys that could all go for 20 on a single game on the perimeter. What else does Will Richard need to do to be able to take that jump? Or does he not even need, just make shots and
Yeah.
guard at a high
Guard.
level.
Guard at a high level, right? Again, the offense last season was not the problem for the Florida Gators. 12th nationally in total offense. It's got to be on the other end of the floor. I think with Will Richard and Elijah Martin and the length and size that those guys have. Now, again, going back to the front court, can you switch 1 through 4? Can your 4 men be able to move and keep guards in front? Because Elijah and Will Richard will be able to guard power forwards in the SEC. They're going to be able to do that because they have that size. Can you make open threes? And defensively, everybody on that team taking a step forward to look, you don't have to be the best defensive team in the country. You don't have to be Iowa State. You don't have to be them. But can you take a jump to where you get in the top 50 and keep your offense where they are, where it is, where it's been? Todd Golden is a very offensive driven coach, which is what Billy Donovan was as well. So can you just get in the top 50 in defense? Like that would be a step forward. And I think if they can do that and keep the offense where it is, man, they got a chance. They got a chance. But I'll go back to my point. Those 3 guards have to be on the same page. If I'm Todd Golden, they are not competing against each other once official practice starts. They are playing on the same team every single day in practice, at least for a segment, because they got to play together.
No, you're right. Chemistry is going to be important. And again, the beauty is, realistically, again, Clayton, Richard, Condon, they all played together last year. You're really bringing in Elijah Martin's the key. He's the key to kind of getting him back to who he was. All right, before we give an off-season grade here, which you better not, I know you're a Gator. I know you're a former coach. Like I'm expecting an A+ from
I'm an
you.
alum.
I'm
I'm an
not
alum.
allowing. I'm not
I'm not
allowing an
alum.
A+ grade. But before we get to that, they did pick up a freshman, a 7'9" freshman that has a lot of people intrigued. Okay, Olivier Roux comes from Quebec, Canada, and he's 7'9" and 290 pounds. And some people think he's going to be, just looking at it, they think he's going to be this major impact guy. And I saw him play a couple of years ago on the AU circuit, and it's going to take time, like a lot of time. Like anybody expecting this kid to come in and make any sort of impact this year, that it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And I'm not sure he's ever going to make an impact at the high major level. Probably worth rolling the dice for Todd Golden. But let's not pretend that this kid's going to be the next Zach Edey and come out of nowhere and be a National Player of the Year or anything more than a spot minutes player. And I'm doing this to try to temper the expectations for this kid more than anything else. I've heard people, around the Florida program who think, okay, maybe this kid's got a chance to be, some integral part of the team this year. And I'm here to say that it's not going to happen, Matt.
I think you bring up a great point, right? And you still have like Gator fans that remember like Dwayne Shinchis,
Oh,
Norm
I love Dwayne
Sloan
Shinsis.
days, like,
Yeah,
and
love
you're gonna have like they have that like old school mentality of like mover blocker, like traditional power forward, traditional center, like Dimitri Hill, like no. If he's on the floor, it's going to be because they're up 25-30. I don't think that you will see him have an impact, especially this year. So if it's not going well in a certain game, Gator fans don't need to start chanting his name that he should go in and impact it because he's just not ready. They've got a great strength staff. They're like I said, Torian Green being in charge of player development. You just gotta give him time.
Yep.
Give him time. And to your point, can he ever impact an SEC game? Maybe.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a while before we see that.
All right, it's time to give Florida an off-season grade, and we haven't gone through their whole, all their depth of Aberdeen and Haw. You talked about Sam Alexis a little bit, but basically they brought in 2 key players here. They brought in two key transfers, Elijah Martin and the big boy Chinyalu. I keep screwing that one up. and I think we'll get to pronounce it correctly if he's really good this year. I'm going to start. I'm going to give him probably a B plus because I think you got Elijah Martin. I think if you're getting the best version of Elijah Martin, that's going to be huge for them. And I was going between a B and a B plus because I still would have liked to have seen them bolster the front court with one more guy or maybe somebody a little more proven. But they don't have the NIL of some of these other programs. They can't go out and pay $1.5 million for a big. That's just not what they have right now in their NIL stable. So they had to go a little bit less expensive and get a guy who was a rotation player last year who they hope can emerge this year.
Yeah, I think that's a good number or letter grade. I would give him a B plus too. I think if Elijah Martin was coming off Elijah Martin from 2 years ago, me and you would both have him in the A's, even with the front court players that they brought in. I think their staff did a great job of addressing needs in the front court. And two, Elijah Martin, dynamic player. Walter Clayton, dynamic player. Will Richard, dynamic player. If you go out and bring someone in that's dynamic in the front court, when you have Condon coming back, chemistry, connectedness, does it ruffle anybody? So I think B plus is a good letter. And again, if Elijah Martin was coming off if Elijah Martin reemerges of who we know he can be, and those three guards can be on the same page, I think they can be in the hunt for an SEC regular season title.
All right, there you have it. Off-season grade. Florida Gators get a B plus from both of us, Matt McCall and myself. And make sure you tune into all the off-season grades on Field of 68 this year. We go through, I think about 40, 45 programs. And you can get all that content on the Field of 68 YouTube or X. We'll see you next time.